Hi, everyone, and welcome to a special Keeper Live on International Women's Day 2021. I'm Lauren Word, the HR manager here at Keeper Security. It has always been our goal to make Keeper an organization with great diversity and inclusion. And I'm proud to say that in the 12 years I've been at Keeper, we've created an amazing team and are very proud of the sensational women at Keeper who share in this mission. I'd like to introduce to you a few of our women in leadership today, along with two special guests to talk openly about supporting women in the workplace and what it's like to work in a male-dominated field. On our panel today is Marcia Dempster, our Senior Director of Channel Sales at Keeper. Marcia, would you like to say hello?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Amy Lindenmeyer, our CFO at Keeper Security. Amy, say hello.
Hi, real excited to be a part of the conversation today.
Emily Winfield, our General Counsel at Keeper Security.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here.
And Ishveen Anand, our CEO and founder of Open Sponsorship.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
And last but never least, Jennifer Fondrave, M&A author and speaker and co-founder of Edge Women's Speakers.
Hey, everyone. Women and the few guys brave enough to join.
Yay. Welcome, ladies, and thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate it. Our first question is going to be for Emily. Emily, what does being an ally to women in the workplace mean to you, and how can both men and women practice being an ally?
Thanks, Lauren. So the most important part to being an ally to women in the workplace, in my opinion, is just to listen and to create an environment where women feel comfortable speaking up and being heard. I try really hard to avoid assuming what anybody's going to need in any one given situation. And so whereas I might want to, bulldoze my way in and say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't okay, or no, you can't say that, that might not make somebody else comfortable. And in order to be an ally, in order to be an advocate for somebody, you need to listen to what they need and how you can help them most. So that I think is most important to being an ally. And for our male colleagues, I think it's important to highlight that, some of the most powerful ways to be an ally to women in the workplace is it's not really the grand gestures. Be aware, keep your eyes open, listen for the comments, listen for the things that kind of go on a day-to-day basis. When your female colleagues aren't being heard or getting the attention or the praise that they deserve. So give them some props and be an advocate for them in the little ways.
Absolutely. That's a great answer. I love that. Marcia, you've had a long and successful career as a sales leader in global companies. What has been the most significant barrier for you in terms of working in mostly male-dominated sales environments?
Well, one, thank you for that. That's very nice. Two, I would say that a barrier that I have faced many times is a concept I like to call a seat at the table, so literally and figuratively. So whether that's a meeting or a dinner, a conference, a golf outing, I mean, the list goes on and on. Am I right? Yes.
Yes.
So what I started really doing is just creating some space and bringing myself to the table. So BYO chair, if you will. I included myself in some of the dinners. I invited myself to relevant meetings. I mean, I was pretty diligent about it and, deliberate of what I was trying to get myself included in. You don't want to include yourself in everything because then you're taking on way more work than any of us have time to accomplish. But if it's a meeting or if it's an event that you feel that you belong at, then you create that space for yourself and you invite yourself or you speak to an ally, whether that's a male or female in leadership that you trust and say, I think I should be included in this. Here's why, here's the business case. And what ended up happening for me is I started to not be overlooked for some of these events. And eventually I became a key part of some of those puzzles. And I stopped waiting to get tapped on the shoulder and kind of just turned around and inserted myself where I knew I already belonged. And it ended up going a long way and kind of created that space for myself, and that space remained, and I started getting included.
I think that's great advice for women at all levels of the organization, right? Jennifer, unfortunately, mergers and acquisitions is an industry generally perceived to be a mostly male. So what is some advice you could share with young women entering a male-dominated field?
Well, kind of keeping with the theme of what we're hearing, I say own your difference. Don't try to conform to how everyone else is doing it, or even worse, trying to be like a guy. And that's born from my experience actually writing my survivor's handbook for mergers and acquisitions. I'd gone through 3 multi-billion-dollar acquisitions, and I wanted to write a book that would help people navigate, not just survive, but thrive through it. And so I interviewed over 60 executives, CEOs and CFOs and private equity. And as you would imagine, it was a lot of men. And what was fascinating to me is how often the men in these conversations would say, this was a really important perspective, an invaluable one for future executives. And it's a point of view that isn't commonly talked about. One guy actually even confessed to me, he said, a guy would never write an M&A playbook from an emotional point of view, talking about the emotions that you go through. And so for me, that just confirmed the importance of owning your difference and making your unique value about what your point of view is. And in my case with M&A, it's allowed me to have a really distinct voice in a male-dominated space.
I love that. Uniqueness is something that we really try and champion here at Keepers. So that goes along with everything that we have in our values. Ishveen, Open Sponsorship is a SaaS company that connects brands to professional athletes. So you are the CEO of a company that crosses 2 perceivably male-dominated fields. What has been the best part of working in this industry for you?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One is I'm obviously very passionate about what I do, hence I started the company. And I think being able to do something in a field, as a former student athlete, as I was a sports agent before. So I think being able to do something I'm passionate about and not having kind of barriers put up because of gender or anything else is great. So I can pursue my passion. Secondly, it is really lovely to think that we all are inspiring others. One of the big things that I wanted to do in the sports field was make sure that there were more like South Asian females who played sports when they were young and everything that delivered to them, but now even work in the field. And so it is pretty amazing when there's like young girls who are like, oh, because of you, I think I can like convince my parents to let me work in sports or whatever else. I think that's lovely. And then I think the third thing is having, Jennifer just said it, having a different viewpoint. So being a CEO, I can sometimes dictate how the company views things. And so, for example, we have a fairly heavy focus on our female athletes. And I know that it's trending right now, women in sports equality, but we've been doing this for like the last kind of few years. And that's obviously a passion point of mine, but it's also, I feel like I have an obligation to female athletes to try and deliver them more deals. And so I think that when I take a step back, I think, because I am different, I care more probably around Paralympians or female athletes or, diversity of our athlete base. I think I can encourage that within the company as well.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, I love everything about that. Amy, what qualities do you believe specifically benefit a woman in a leadership role?
Yeah, well, not all women will have the same leadership styles, but generally speaking, I think that women bring a complete range of qualities beyond some of the traditional ones, such as self-awareness, emotional intelligence, humility, authenticity. More and more women in leadership positions are pushing the boundaries of gender equality by using all of those strengths: their skill, their knowledge, their experience, and their emotion. I think in the modern workforce, employees are more desiring of getting constant feedback and having a relationship with their manager and a better work-life balance. And I've noticed that the women that I've both worked for and with have been very, passionate and had an enthusiasm and a capacity to serve and foster such a collaborative team environment that fosters that for women. I'm a huge fan of the teamwork makes the dream work saying. I actually, which way I have it up here on my wall. So, gender itself is not a specific factor in whether or not a person is going to be a great leader. So as women, I think we should be confident of our leadership abilities and depend on our own individual strengths and personality traits.
Those are great and very valid points. Yeah. Emily, who are some people you have looked up to as mentors throughout your career and why?
So I've been really fortunate to have a slew of amazing mentors, both men and women, through the course of my career, lawyers, non-lawyers. One of my most valued mentors, maybe a little cheesy, was actually my grandmother. She graduated as valedictorian of her high school class in an era where women just didn't have as many opportunities or options sort of to pursue the professional path or higher education, things of that sort. So she was always my biggest advocate. She was always, always pushing me to sort of like, go ahead, do that. Like, why not? Sky's the limit sort of thing. So she was probably one of my greatest mentors. And another one of my professional mentors at one of the previous law firms I worked at, still one of my dearest mentors and dearest friends, had a saying that has stuck with me through my entire career, and that is that the practice of law is a lot about see one, do one, teach one. And not only have I had great mentors, but I've realized through my career how important it is to be a mentor to other people, and that how valuable and mutually beneficial that experience is to be like, okay, I remember when I was watching and had absolutely no idea what I was doing, and now 2 times later I'm going to be the teacher. And so that idea of mentorship has gone both ways in my career, and I think it's been really important.
No, I love the idea of paying it forward. I mean, that's how we educate the next generation, right? For sure. Marcia, do you ever experience resistance when leading men, and how do you overcome that, if so?
So I haven't really, not from the men that I've led, no. The men on my current team and most of my past teams have been very respectful and collaborative. But where I have had some issues in the past was some of my, whether they were peers in leadership or leadership above me, some male leadership that I've worked with in previous roles. So the concept of working twice as hard and getting half of the recognition is a very real one for me. But, through a lot of those times is where I really learned how to, like I mentioned before, kind of create a seat at the table. And that eventually did end up creating some of the respect that I felt like I was owed. And I think that possibly had a good effect down the line as well. So my team kind of saw me demanding respect in certain situations, and they valued that. And I think in doing that, I really did earn some of that respect. It took a while, but I got where I needed to be. And, you learn a lot from those moments, and they're not easy, and they really test your patience and your sanity. But if you can get through that, you can pretty much get through anything. So it's just about keeping your head up and keep moving and always ask for the respect that you're owed.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice. Ishveen, do you think women in tech have a higher bar to clear than women in other industries?
I don't know if it's versus other industries. I think women generally have a higher bar to clear. I'd say being a tech leader, potentially there's so much that you have to do in terms of, raising money, obviously hiring, scaling fast, thinking about product. So I'd say women can sometimes be like stereotyped of, oh, you're very good at, you're an empathetic leader, but you're not very good at numbers, for example, right? And so I think one of the hardest things probably about working in tech or working at like this level in tech is that we have to prove that we're good at everything, and some of those chips are weighed against us. And so it's a case of like how do you come to the table and say, okay, no, I have a right and a left brain. I'm a good manager, but I can also be, the person who can scale really fast and grow a company. I can spend like X million, but I can so I think that's like the hardest thing, which is trying to show that you can be everything, where I don't think anyone has ever said to a male tech leader, oh, I don't think you could do all of these different fields.
Absolutely. That is very valid as well. Amy, when you started out in finance, did you see yourself becoming a CFO of a company? Given the known gender gap in finance, especially at leadership levels, were there any unique challenges that you had to overcome as you progressed to a CFO?
At the start of my career, no, I did not think that to myself, like, oh, I'm going to go be the CFO one day. It wasn't really till maybe a few years ago that I really considered the possibility and took some time to really assess what is it that I want from my career and what does that mean for the rest of my life, my home life in particular. So from a challenge perspective, while I wouldn't qualify this as unique, the choice to have children was certainly something I was worried could present a challenge in my career progression. It was kind of eye-opening to start to think about, well, geez, when should I have children, right? Consistent with my career. Should I wait till I'm established? Should I have done it before when I was early in my career? Because I've kind of missed that boat now. And it's, something that not everyone has to consider. So as it was, I was somewhere in the middle of that when I had my two girls who are now 8 and almost 6. And in general, I was fortunate, right? It did not present a huge challenge to my career progression. However, that's not the same as saying it wasn't challenging, and it's not challenging on a daily basis sometimes. And I know for a fact that for many other women, or maybe even most other women, it still is a challenge. So, I at times have tried to kind of play by the existing rules and, adjust to the male-dominated culture, just like others. But what I try to do now, and, most days I succeed, right, is really be unapologetic and choose every day to kind of lead as my own authentic self.
I think that's amazing, breaking those barriers down, because we need them to be gone, right? Emily, you've had quite a career in law as an attorney, an adjunct professor of law, and now a general counsel at Keeper Security. What advice would you give to your younger self entering this career field?
I think first and foremost, I would say, are you sure you want to do this? Kidding aside, it's funny that you say that you asked that, because some of the things I would tell my younger self, I think each of us would find ourselves having to remind ourselves on a daily basis sometimes. First, I would tell myself, be kind to yourself. The profession is difficult. It's challenging. You will deal with a lot of challenging personalities on a day-to-day basis. It's sort of part and parcel for what you do. You're going to have bad days. You're going to make mistakes. And it's going to drive you nuts, because you will miss opportunities to say just the right thing at the right time. As you dream in your head, this Law and Order sort of like, always saying the right thing at the right time. And then you'll, say it to yourself 10 times over on the car ride home. So I remind myself to be kind to myself, that it's okay. Forgive yourself when things don't go well, and to move on. A few other things. I would probably remind myself that there's many paths to the same destination. You don't have to choose to be defined by any one experience. Or to let anybody else define you by any one experience. And I think that that can be a particular challenge. And I would have to remind my younger self that an unfortunate reality of that is that not everyone's going to like you, and you're probably not going to love that, but it's going to be an essential part of the journey. And the last thing I would say is take some time on the journey for the most important part, and that's going to be the people that you meet along the way. They're going to be the most interesting and important part of what you do. You are going to meet some amazing people, and if you take the time to really sort of be in the moment with them, you're going to come away with some of lifelong friends and some of your fiercest advocates. So I would remind my younger self to slow down a little bit sometimes and take time for what's important.
I think that's amazing. Yeah, for sure. So Jennifer, how do you deal with the only woman in the meeting room, with being the only woman in the meeting room or on a stage at a conference?
You know, it's funny, Lauren, since you asked that question, I was thinking throughout my career, I've often been the only woman. I've been in beer advertising. I'll tell you, those casting sessions were a lot of fun as a female. I was in automotive and enterprise, and I would say that for me, focusing on the value that I could bring to the dialogue, I didn't make it an us versus them discussion in each of those instances when it was predominantly men in the room. It was what value can I bring, and having confidence that I had value to bring. And that comes with time and experience, but having respect for what you can bring to that dialogue is hugely beneficial. And it's one of the reasons why I co-founded Edge Women Speakers with a number of other amazing female expert speakers. It wasn't that we didn't think, the male point of view wasn't worthy. We just felt that a female point of view, more diverse voices on main stages at conferences was important, and that meeting planners needed to have exposure to those female speakers more easily. And so we created Edge Women Speakers to create that platform so we could raise the visibility of women. So for me, the advice really is having respect in the value that you can bring and owning that.
No, I love that. I think our theme today is taking up space and being unapologetic for that. It's wonderful. And so two final questions to all of the panelists will kind of go around. The first is, how can non-female identifying colleagues be better allies to women in the workplace? So Ishveen, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I'd say the main thing is it's such a hard balance of don't treat women differently because they're women, but understand that there's differences between us and try and do something, about that. And so by that, I mean, the sheer point of women who are married, maybe their husband's part may play a big difference in their social life, even their work social life that like men don't have to think about, or the fact that like giving feedback to a woman, like maybe a man is like more worried about giving feedback because they don't want to hurt your feelings. Well, that doesn't make sense, right? Everyone needs to grow and whatever else. So I think just maybe even having a very honest dialogue, like, hey, how can I give you feedback, or how can I help you grow? Maybe it's different to how you might talk to a guy who you might, be in a bar at night and you're like, hey, you did that in the meeting, I wouldn't do that again. Like maybe it's not like that, or maybe it is like that. But I think the point being is that we all want to grow together. And so how can you help me grow? How can I help you grow, knowing that we're different because of gender?
Absolutely. I think that's great. Marcia, what about you?
I will come at that question from a sales perspective because that's the world that I live in. But I think the easiest thing to do would be the mentor-mentee concept. So, for non-female allies, look to women as mentors and also take them on as mentees if they ask for that. So a lot of my biggest and most influential mentors have actually been men. One of my previous managers, his name is Andy. He's still a friend and he was an incredible leader. My current leader now, Mark, is an incredible mentor, and I learn from him every day, and I wouldn't be in this job if it wasn't for him. So some of my biggest advocates actually have been male, which is incredible. And then I would also say, from the mentee perspective, or even just seeking advice or seeking counsel from, your female colleagues. Emily and I were talking about this the other day. We have a colleague in the office with us, Sean, and he often bounces questions off of us, or just, here's a situation that I have going on. What do you think? And he's not coming to us because we are women. He's coming to us because he values our opinions, whether it's we're offering a female perspective, maybe, but mostly he values us as people and as colleagues. And that's important. It means a lot to us. And I think if you approach, it's exactly what Ishveen says, approach women as if they are equal, but also understand that maybe they operate a little differently or they receive feedback or give feedback differently. So I would agree with that for sure.
That's a really great advice for sure. Amy, what was your viewpoint on this?
Yeah, I would say, have a shared understanding that men and women aren't at war here. It's quite the opposite, really. Like, the call for gender parity is not about giving unfair advantage to women, but it's amplifying talent diversity so that we can drive a more sustainable business together, right? And that's a win-win for everyone. So, the simple things are, to be a better ally, acknowledge and encourage women in the workplace, help create an environment that fosters and supports their career development or career progression, and advocate for them when an opportunity comes up.
Yeah, straightforward. I agree. Emily, what's your take on this?
Well, I don't want to be repetitive, but I pick up a bit on what Marcia and Amy said here, and keep it in the context of coming from as a lawyer, and I spent most of my career in law firms. And I think that one of the best things that men can do, particularly for young female attorneys, is the idea of mentoring and, providing opportunities to be seen. And maybe that's just, it doesn't, again, have to be a grand gesture. It's the idea of, I really want you to join this client call, not because I need you to say anything, not because, I just want you to listen and to see how this is going to go and understand that, maybe that's, it's an M&A transaction, right? And we have all men on the call, and it's great. It's important for to create those opportunities for your female colleagues. And I think mentorship is probably, one of the biggest important things, particularly in the law firm environment. So I would highly encourage that in my past life.
And Lauren, sorry, I was just going to say, I love Emily's comment that it doesn't have to be grand gestures. I think lip service is one thing, but you have to take action, but it doesn't have to be big, bold movements. And I benefited from that. Frankly, the example that I would give is I was in an event in the green room with other female speakers, and there was one other male speaker, and we were back there, and the women were in a circle, and I was a VP of marketing, and they were all badass CMOs, very high level, and I was just shocked that I was in the same room with them. And the male CMO came over to me and said, "Join the circle. You deserve to be there." And I remember thinking, it had such a profound impact on how I was even on the stage afterwards, how I engaged and interacted with them. And for me, that was such a small gesture, but it had such a profound impact. And so I think Emily's point about it doesn't have to be, big, bold gestures. It's the small things that can really have an impact.
No, I 100% agree. Ishveen, what's your take on it?
Are we talking about the same question?
Yeah, you get to also weigh in on it as well.
Yeah. No, I think I love the idea of the small gestures. I think, how many times do we say, like, how are you? And do we really ever mean it, right? And I think there's something about that. And I was actually just thinking about when you were telling your story, Jennifer, I actually thought you meant that the males was outside the circle at first, and so then I was thinking, like, actually it's the opposite as well, which is, do we sit down and go to our male colleagues like, hey, what are you dealing with that might be different to us? And I think it's all about just like having honest and open dialogue with each other, and like being able to be our true self, talk about what we're going through, which is, I think, really important.
Yeah, I think that was great advice, ladies. So the second and final question is, the theme for International Women's Day this year is I Choose to Challenge. And collectively, we can all help create an inclusive world by choosing to challenge gender bias, specifically in the workplace. So how will you make the commitment this year to challenge inequality in your specific field? Amy, we'll start with you.
Sure. So that can feel a bit daunting, right? To kind of personally challenge the inequality in your given field. So, I remind myself that I'm not expected to single-handedly fix the problem, but to be part of the solution. So I think my commitment this year is to create a meaningful network. We've talked a lot about mentorship. I think this is very similar in that way. Networking can be a really powerful tool to kind of build confidence and your professional support structure. It's not about just adding people, to your names list, right? Like I have so many followers or friends or whatever they are, but actually creating real personal and professional conversations and interactions. The more strategic connections we have, the better our chances of success in, increasingly competitive industries such as finance. And I think it really rests on current women leaders to embrace their role model status and address these challenges head on with action and in their daily execution.
Oh, that's for sure. That's great. And what about you, Jennifer? What would be your take on this? What is you choosing to challenge?
For me, really, it's raising the voices of younger females. And frankly, that comes from the example my mom set. She passed away last year, and one of the amazing things that happened was how many younger. So she was a Chicago model, saucy 60s and 70s, 1970s model, and a number of younger models who came up through when my mom was a model reached out to me after my mom passed and said, "Your mom helped me navigate the modeling world, which is really tricky." And the fact that so many of them said, your mom was generous with her time and she helped me be stronger. And so for me, a big part of, paying it forward, choosing to challenge is helping younger women have that voice. The pie is big enough for everyone. That's the way I look at it.
No, I think that's great role model for our younger generation, is that we all deserve that place at the table. We all can take up that space and lift each other up. Emily, what are you choosing to challenge?
Okay, I think I'm going to do this twice in a row where I'm going to dovetail Jennifer. Like, gosh. No, I think this year is really important for me to create, to the extent that I can, to create opportunities for younger female lawyers. And I have a great opportunity as an adjunct professor, and my students will come all the time and say, "Well, how did you do this, or how did you get there, or what if I, should I pick this internship or should I pick that internship?" And just taking the time to have those conversations, and where I can, I've had the privilege of working with incredible attorneys and professionals over more years than I'd like to count. And so if I can make those introductions and provide those opportunities for women who are starting out in the law, then I think that I have a desire to do so and a commitment and an obligation to do so.
Absolutely. Ishveen, how do you choose to challenge?
Yeah, I think there's two things. I think one, echo a lot of the other answers, which is around what I'm doing for others. So, as I mentioned, like the female athletes or the Paralympian, or also who are we hiring, and make sure that we have strong diversity across our team. And then I think the other thing is how are we ourselves continuing to better ourselves so we keep setting an example. And so, I was actually recently asked this for another thing, and my choose to challenge was about being uncomfortable. And we push through, the chances are we're breaking another barrier for someone else. And so I think there's two parts, which is what are we doing for each other, but what are we also doing to make sure that we continue to grow?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And finally, Marcia, how are you choosing to challenge?
Well, again, coming from the sales angle, technology sales is not an easy business. It's very competitive. It's a lot of hours, a lot of time, a lot of research and effort. I have a female on my team. Her name's Skylar. She's wicked, wicked smart. She's highly motivated. In cases where you have someone like that, you want to do everything you can to make sure she feels empowered, and if she, is she looking to go down the leadership road? Does she want to be in sales forever? Because she could be, and she'd make a fortune. But it's, it's taking the time and saying, like, what do you want this to look like, and how can I help? Like, what can I do to get you where you want to go? And whether it's, helping her to close a deal, which she doesn't really need me to do that, but, just providing that guidance and being available. And if it's the case where she does want to move down the leadership path, it's giving her that opportunity, whether it's leading a team meeting or having her present at something like this, just giving an opportunity where it's not super easy to come by opportunities when you're a woman in sales, but I will just create them for her.
No, I love that. That's so amazing. And so I just want to thank everyone on the panel and for those thoughtful answers, and for everyone joining us. With the challenge comes change, and we are so proud to know that strong women like you who challenge gender bias and support women each and every day. So thanks to everyone who joined us today and for a special International Women's Day of Keeper Live.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining us.